What if I told you that the moment you feared your whole life, the moment they told you would mark the end of everything, already happened? That the final breath you've been taught to dread wasn't actually your last? What if you're not waiting to cross over? Because you already did. You wouldn't remember, of course. That's part of the design. You see, the way we've been conditioned to understand death is incredibly limited. You were taught it's a straight line, a hard stop, a definitive ending that closes the book of your existence. One moment you're here, and the next, you're gone. But consciousness doesn't move in straight lines. It loops, it layers, it expands. And what you call death is not the end of the story. It's a page turn, a shift, a pivot in awareness so subtle, so profound, that when it happened to you, you didn't even know. That's right. Somewhere, in a version of your life you can no longer access with your ordinary mind, your body failed. Maybe it was an accident, a sudden illness, a quiet, unexplainable moment while sleeping. But instead of ending, your consciousness shifted. Like water finding a new path, your awareness continued forward, but on a slightly different trail. A new branch in the infinite tree of timelines. And the wildest part? You felt it. Maybe not as a dramatic jolt or cosmic announcement, but as an uncanny shift you couldn't quite put your finger on, a moment of heavy déjà vu, a sudden emotional drop, a day that didn't feel real. That strange fog where everything seemed familiar, but hollow. For a few seconds you sensed the veil thinning, you caught a whisper of something ancient, then it vanished. That was you transitioning. Of course, your rational mind would never accept this. It needs linearity, control, logic. It needs death to be final, and life to be measurable. But your soul knows better. It knew this would happen. It planned for it. Because this reality, the one you're in right now, wasn't the next phase of your original life. It was the continuation of your story in a new version of Earth, one you slipped into like a new skin, and you brought only what was necessary to keep going. Your essence, your unresolved lessons, your karmic imprints, and your longing to remember. That longing is not random. It's the echo of what you left behind. Not the people, not the place, but the awareness. The clarity you had for a split second when you were between worlds. The raw truth you touched just before you crossed. That's why nothing quite feels the same. Why certain moments in your life now feel stretched or surreal. Why the timeline feels like it's folding in on itself. You didn't fall into a dream. You fell into a version of reality designed to hold your frequency while you recalibrated. But here's the key. You weren't forced into this. You chose it. Not the you sitting in this body right now, but the deeper you. The self beyond names, roles, and histories. The you that existed before breath and will exist beyond form. That part of you knew you weren't finished yet. So it orchestrated a soft landing. You didn't wake up in a new timeline with flashing lights or grand ceremony. You woke up in a nearly identical continuation, a subtle echo of the life you were living. But something is different here. Maybe the rules feel looser. Maybe time feels off. Maybe you've started noticing the cracks in the illusion, the little glitches that make no logical sense, the repeating numbers, the moments of intense awareness that come out of nowhere. Those aren't accidents, they're reminders. Reminders that this reality isn't what you were told it is. Because if you're already dead in one timeline, and alive here, then what is this place? What is the point of continuing? Why would your soul bring you here, and not just return to source? Because this is the in-between, the bridge. This is a realm of reflection, of refinement, of remembrance. It's not the punishment people fear, and it's not the paradise people hope for. It's a conscious projection, a soul-sculpted simulation built to mirror your internal state, magnify your patterns, and give you one more chance to remember who you are from within the illusion. You're not in a prison, you're in a classroom. Every discomfort you feel here is not proof that something's wrong, it's proof that something is working. Because pain doesn't follow you from timeline to timeline unless it has something to teach you. You didn't die because you failed, you transitioned because you were ready. Ready to go deeper, to see clearer, to confront the remaining distortions you carried into this echo of existence. And the only way to truly purify the soul is to enter an illusion so convincing, so sticky, so emotionally charged, that you have no choice but to face everything you once avoided. and so you chose to forget, because if you remembered the moment you arrived, it would ruin the whole point. You'd bypass the discomfort. You'd dismiss the lessons. You'd try to skip ahead to the ending again. But awareness isn't given, it's earned. So you signed up for the ultimate challenge, to enter a simulated reality where you'd forget your origin, your power, your multidimensionality, and then wake up inside of it anyway, not through force, through frequency. You're not being tested by some external judge. You're being tested by your own capacity to see the truth behind the veil. And here's the secret. When you begin to see it, when you begin to feel it, everything starts to shift. The colors change, the timing changes, the characters change. You're no longer just surviving the script. You're editing it. That's the first sign of remembrance. You're not waiting to die someday. You're already in the after. And what you do here determines whether you loop back into another version of the dream or finally dissolve the need to dream at all. The real question isn't, what happens when I die? It's, what did I forget when I crossed over? Because once you remember that, nothing stays the same. What if everything you've been taught about the afterlife was backwards? What if the world you're in right now, the one with clocks and gravity, heartbreak and traffic lights, was not the prelude to anything, but the continuation? What if you're not waiting for the afterlife, because you're already in it? You wake up each day expecting this to be the real world, the hard world, the solid world, the one before eternity begins. You've been told there's something else waiting for you on the other side, something more vibrant, more divine, more significant. But what if this is the other side? Not heaven, not hell, something much more precise, something designed. Look around you. This world feels just real enough to convince you, but strange enough to make you question it. Time doesn't flow the way you think it should. Some days feel stretched, others disappear. Emotions swell from nowhere and vanish without reason. People come into your life carrying significance that defies logic. And when you really stop to examine it deeply, honestly, the lines of this place begin to shimmer like a dream you're only half awake in. That's not by accident. You're not in the world before death. You're in the echo, a slowed down, layered reflection of a higher reality that moves too quickly, too purely for your current awareness to process. The density here, the sensation of weight, of delay, of resistance, it's not a flaw, it's part of the equation. It's the very slowness of this reality that allows you to see yourself. In higher states, reality moves at the speed of thought. Entire moments pass like lightning, entire lessons felt in an instant. But here, everything stretches, emotions linger. Thoughts spiral, cause and effect are separated by time, not to punish you, but to give you time to see, because without the delay, you wouldn't reflect. Without the resistance, you wouldn't wake up. You're not here to pass time waiting for some cosmic reward. You're not here to prove yourself worthy of something greater. You're in a realm designed for the very purpose of remembering who you are, but not through sermons or scriptures, through experience, through repetition, through patterns that loop until you notice them, and once you do, begin to alchemize them. And still, so many believe the afterlife is somewhere else. Some distant paradise filled with clouds and perfection, or a place of fire and judgment, depending on the choices made. But these ideas were metaphors, symbols trying to explain something much harder to grasp. The truth is this: your consciousness is not linear. It doesn't die, it shifts. And the place it shifts into? That's what you're standing in right now. Think of this realm like a dream layered on top of a greater dream, a hallway between worlds, a mirror coated in fog. You didn't come here to sit still. You came here to remember through motion, to rediscover the divine by walking through the illusion of separation. Everything here is symbolic. Every interaction is a mirror. Every environment a reflection of inner terrain. You think you're moving through space, but really, space is moving through you. You believe you're surrounded by matter, but you're surrounded by meaning. The chair beneath you, the walls around you, the sky above your head. They're all vibrations slowed down into visibility. They're not as solid as they feel. They're placeholders, signposts, energetic maps, dressed up as physical form. That's why so many people feel like something is off, like they're sleepwalking through a world they half recognize. Because you do recognize it. You designed it. You set it all in motion from a higher octave of yourself. And then, you entered it, willingly, intentionally, so you could learn by immersion. But why make it so hard to remember? Because remembering too early dissolves the point. If you knew exactly where you came from, you'd spend all your energy trying to get back. You'd bypass the experiences that grow your soul. You'd dismiss the mirrors as illusions instead of invitations. This world, this so-called before life, is the perfect disguise. It wraps you in identity. It fills you with longing. It puts just enough weight on your shoulders to provoke questions like, "Why am I here?" and "What is all of this for?" That longing is the invitation. That ache in your chest is not something wrong, it's something waking up. You weren't thrown into this world. You descended into it, not as a punishment, but as a sacred dive, a journey into density. A choice to incarnate inside a slowed-down field of energy where thoughts become things, where patterns take shape, where truth hides in metaphors and waits to be decoded. Even your body is symbolic, a vessel of awareness, a map of memory. It's not the real you, it's the current interface, the vehicle for navigating this frequency. It ages, it aches. It breaks down, not because you're broken, but because this layer of existence was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be revealing. You're not climbing toward the afterlife. You're within it. You're within one dimension of many, one frequency of infinite. And that knowing, that realization, is not meant to make you escape it. It's meant to make you master it. Because here's the secret. Once you stop trying to escape this realm and start understanding it, it begins to respond differently. The loops soften, the resistance loosens, the patterns reveal themselves. And when that happens, you're no longer trapped in the echo. You begin to play with it, to co-create, to awaken. The material world, for all its distractions, is not your enemy. It's a mirror, and like all mirrors, it doesn't lie. It simply reflects. So what is it reflecting back to you? Where in your life do you feel compressed, confused, repeating? Those are clues. Those are the dream's way of nudging you to notice that you're dreaming. That the version of reality you see is not the reality, it's your version of it. Filtered through the beliefs you carry, the emotions you repress, and the memories you haven't fully integrated. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you truly begin to see this place for what it is, not a prison, not a punishment, but a projection. Something ancient stirs in you, not fear, not urgency, but familiarity. You've been here before, not in this exact shape, but in essence. This isn't your first descent into the density. You've entered many echoes, you've walked through many veils, and each time, you brought back a piece of yourself, a fragment of knowing, a sliver of light. And now, once again, you're remembering. Not because someone told you, not because you read it in a book, but because something inside you recognizes the rhythm of this place. The softness behind the noise, the stillness behind the speed. That recognition is the beginning of mastery. You're not waiting to cross over, you already have. And now, you get to decide what to do with that truth. Not tomorrow. Now. What if every decision you've ever made didn't erase the paths you didn't take, but simply branched reality into a new direction where you did take them? What if there isn't just one version of your life playing out, but infinite versions, each one echoing through its own universe, shaped by a single choice, a fleeting emotion, or a shift in belief? And what if the you that's reading this right now is not the only you, just the one most tuned in to this frequency? It might sound like science fiction, but the deeper you go into the nature of consciousness and quantum reality, the more you begin to see. Parallel worlds aren't theory, they're infrastructure. They're the scaffolding behind what we perceive as reality. You're not just living one life, you're navigating one thread in a vast, multidimensional tapestry. And the twist? You've already shifted timelines more than once. You just don't remember. At every crossroads, big or small, something splinters. Not outward, like an explosion, but inward, like an unfolding. Reality doesn't collapse when you make a choice. It expands. Each potential future remains alive somewhere. Your consciousness simply aligns with the version most resonant to your current vibration, your current emotion, your current belief. You think of it as choosing, but what's really happening is tuning. like adjusting the dial on a cosmic radio to lock into a different station, while all other stations continue to play, just outside your range of hearing. You've done this before. In fact, you're doing it constantly. Remember the version of you that didn't take the job? That stayed with the person? That turned left instead of right? That version didn't vanish. It kept going. And not in your imagination, but in a timeline just as real, just as tangible, playing out in a frequency you're no longer aligned with. But here's the secret most people never consider. Your awareness doesn't die when a version of you ends. It migrates, it relocates, like moving from one room to another in an endless mansion of mirrored realities. Consciousness is not bound to a single thread, it flows wherever resonance leads it. So when something happens, a sudden trauma, a moment of awakening, or even death in one reality, your consciousness simply shifts, often instantly, into the next closest timeline that can support the continuation of your experience. That's why some people feel like their lives split into a before and after moment they can't fully explain. Something changed. The world feels the same, but off, subtly different. Maybe a relationship dynamic suddenly reverses. Maybe a scar you clearly remember is no longer there. Maybe someone recalls an event completely differently than you do, with conviction. These aren't mistakes in memory. They're collisions between timelines, soft echoes from versions of you still playing out somewhere else. Reality isn't linear, it's layered. You don't move through time. You move through timelines, and time simply reflects the rate of change between frames. Just like in a film reel, every frame already exists. You're just the projector, cycling through the images fast enough to create continuity. But what you often forget is this: you can jump reels, and you already have. The life you're living right now isn't the only one you've known. There are versions of you who made different choices, who failed where you succeeded, who healed where you broke, who remembered when you forgot. And sometimes, those versions bleed through, in dreams, in strange hunches, in moments where you feel emotions that don't belong to your current story. You think you're feeling something random, but you're actually brushing up against an alternate self, one whose pain or triumph echoes so strongly it spills into your awareness. This isn't mysticism, it's mechanics. Quantum theory already hints at this. Every particle exists in a state of probability until it's observed. That means every future is possible, until you tune into one. The act of awareness itself collapses potential into form, but it doesn't eliminate the other outcomes. It just moves you into alignment with a particular expression of reality. The others continue, just outside your field of attention. Your soul, in its higher form, isn't local. It's not living just one life at a time. It's exploring multiple lives, often simultaneously, collecting insights, playing with contrast, refining wisdom. What you call you is just one point of focus among many. And the fact that you're here, reading these words, means this version of you, this timeline, is starting to become more lucid, more aware, more sensitive to the multidimensional structure of existence. And as you awaken to that, something incredible happens. The walls between timelines start to thin. You begin to receive insights not just from your past, but from alternate presents, even alternate futures. You'll feel this when you suddenly just know something without ever learning it. When you meet someone and instantly feel the weight of unfinished business. When you get a sense that you've already lived through a moment you're about to experience. These are not accidents, they're glimpses through the veil. And if you feel like something is watching, guiding, nudging, sometimes that's not a guardian or an angel. Sometimes it's you, from another timeline, whispering through the walls of the maze. You are not singular, you are multi-expressed. And that means the limits you think you're facing in this life are not as absolute as they seem. You can shift your trajectory, you can redirect the story, but not by force, by frequency. Because the version of you who has already healed, already created, already awakened, they exist. And they're not far. They're simply vibrating at a level you haven't yet stabilized in. So how do you shift? You don't need a portal. You are the portal. Your beliefs are the keys. Your emotions are the fuel. The moment you change how you see yourself, the entire simulation begins to adjust around that vision. Not immediately, not all at once, but steadily. You'll meet people who feel strangely familiar. You'll encounter situations that mirror past wounds, but offer new outcomes. And eventually, you'll notice something subtle yet profound. The scenery of your life has changed, without you ever leaving the room, because you changed timelines, and you didn't have to die to do it. You simply had to align. So, what does this mean for you now, in this moment? It means the choices you make aren't isolated. They're vibrational cues, telling the system which version of reality to sink you into. Every act of awareness is a steering wheel. Every decision rooted in love, courage, and truth pulls you toward a timeline where those qualities shape your world. And the versions of you who gave up, who settled, who chose fear, they still exist, not to haunt you, but to remind you. Every timeline is just a frequency away. Which one are you choosing? Which one are you living? Because if you can feel the weight of your unlived lives pressing at the edges of your awareness, it's not a burden, it's an invitation. You are not confined to this path. You are not locked into the life you're living. You're in a stream of infinite unfolding, and the stream doesn't end. It expands. So don't ask, what if, as if it's past tense. Ask it as if it's power. What if you shifted now? What if death was never meant to be the end? What if everything you believed about that moment, the closing of the eyes, the final breath, the fading heartbeat, was actually a transition, not a termination? You've been told death is a wall, a permanent boundary, the absolute separation between this world and the unknown. But what if death isn't a wall at all? What if it's a door, and not just any door, but one you've already walked through? You probably don't remember, at least not with your conscious mind. That's the brilliance of how it was designed. You weren't meant to carry the memory in detail, only the imprint, only the residue. That subtle knowing that something shifted, that life feels somehow hollow or different, that the world you're in isn't quite the one you started in. So many people think of death as a defeat, as a failure of the body to keep up. But the truth is far more complex and far more beautiful. Death is not a malfunction. It's a mechanism. It's a doorway your consciousness moves through when the current version of reality can no longer hold your vibration, or when your journey within it has reached a natural threshold. But here's the key. You didn't die and disappear. You died and repositioned. You didn't stop existing. You shifted into a new version of the dream, one that felt nearly identical on the surface, but with subtle, undeniable changes in its texture, tone, and truth. There are countless stories, buried in the corners of the world, whispered between the lines of sacred texts and personal journals. People who flatlined, who stopped breathing, whose brains showed no signs of activity, and yet returned. But they didn't return the same. Their eyes changed. Their words changed. Their sense of what's real changed. And most importantly, their relationship with fear, particularly the fear of death, was erased. They speak of peace so profound it erases all language, of feeling themselves outside their bodies, observing with clarity, unbound by pain or panic, of seeing scenes from their life as if flipping through pages of a book, not with judgment, but with deep understanding. They describe being surrounded by light, by presence, by something so familiar it felt like going home. Some even recall conversations, instructions, or choices given. Do you want to return, or stay? But here's where it gets even more interesting. When they do return, many don't go back to the exact life they left. The people may be the same, the setting may look identical, but something's off. Relationships feel different, time moves differently. Certain events seem to have vanished, reversed, or shifted. It's as if they re-entered a nearby version of their life, not the precise one they exited. That's because they did. You see, when death touches you, even for a moment, it creates a fork in the road. One path continues without you, another opens up for you to walk back in. But you don't return as a casualty. You return as a traveler, a navigator of realities. You didn't cheat death. You negotiated it. You harmonized with a deeper truth, one that transcends the physical laws you thought were fixed. Your soul doesn't operate by the rules of biology. It doesn't measure time by heartbeats or brainwaves. It measures resonance. It moves where the growth is, where the healing is, where the remembrance is. So if you're still here, in a body, watching the sky shift, feeling the weight of memory, it's not because death skipped over you, it's because your path diverged, and you walked through the door without fully realizing it. Think about the moments in your life where time felt suspended, where the world around you seemed to blur, stretch, or freeze. That car crash that almost happened. That illness you weren't supposed to survive. That moment of deep despair where you felt yourself slipping, and then, somehow, waking up into a day that felt eerily quiet, like the air itself had shifted. Those were portals, thresholds, intersections between versions of reality. In those moments, something in you crossed over, not just physically, spiritually, vibrationally, cosmically. And you may have felt it afterward. The world felt the same, but your place in it didn't. People started reacting to you differently. Old wounds resurfaced, not to harm you, but to be healed. Certain memories began to dissolve or rearrange. You may have questioned your sanity, but you weren't losing your mind. You were stepping into a different one. There is a quiet truth buried underneath all the noise of fear and finality. Death is the greatest illusion of separation. It's not the end of you, it's the end of a context. And just like waking from a dream, it can feel abrupt, disorienting, even terrifying, until you realize you're still here, just wearing a different set of rules. In the higher planes of awareness, death is not mourned the way it is here. It's honored. It's understood as a movement of energy, a return to source, or, in many cases, a redirection. What you call dying, the soul experiences as a pivot, a recalibration, a choice to continue the journey in a more aligned stream of reality. And it's not just about big, dramatic near-death events. Sometimes, you shift in your sleep. Sometimes, a part of you dies quietly, a belief, an identity, a way of seeing the world, and you awaken into a timeline where your inner world has changed so deeply that your outer world can't help but follow. These are still transitions, still deaths. But they don't come with a coffin or a funeral. They come with silence, with the slow unraveling of what you thought was true. You've died before, many times. You just don't call it death. You call it change, reinvention, awakening. But on a soul level, they are one and the same. So what does this mean for you now? It means death is not hunting you. It's inviting you to expand, to see beyond the veil of form, to trust that when one version of your reality ends, another is waiting. And not waiting by accident, but by design. Your design. It also means the fear you carry, the anxiety around loss, the tightness in your chest when you think of endings, is not about death itself. It's about forgetting what death really is. It's about the illusion that you can be erased, when in truth, you are eternal movement. You are the awareness that slips through timelines like light through glass. So, if you're still here, reading this, breathing in this reality, then your journey through the door of death wasn't a mistake. It was a transition you navigated with ancient precision. Maybe you forgot the crossing. But you're not here by accident. You're here because there's still something your soul wants to express in this version of the dream. You didn't fail by coming back. You chose to return, not to repeat, but to remember. And now that you know this, or rather, now that you remember this, you'll begin to see that death isn't something that waits at the end of the road. It's a current that flows beneath everything. A whisper in the background. A gentle invitation to keep evolving, to keep shifting, to keep walking through the doors no one else can see. And when you stop fearing it, it stops hiding. Because the greatest secret of all is this: the more you understand death, the more fully you'll begin to live. What if the strange moments you brush off as coincidence, the repeating numbers, the perfect timing, the faces that seem eerily familiar, weren't random at all? What if déjà vu wasn't a malfunction in your brain, but evidence that you've walked this path before in another version of reality? What if the simulation you're living in isn't broken? It's intelligent? And it's not glitching. It's mirroring. You see, we've been trained to look at life as something happening to us, a sequence of events we must react to, endure, or attempt to control. But what if everything around you, the people, the conversations, the challenges, even the silent spaces, are not separate from you at all? What if reality is not reactive, but responsive? That would mean you're not just a participant in this simulation, you're a generator, a projector. A mirror standing in the middle of a hall of reflections, each one shaped by the thoughts you carry, the emotions you suppress, and the beliefs you embody. This world doesn't glitch, it reflects. And it does it so precisely, so intimately, that the reflection is often invisible until you're ready to see it. That painful relationship that keeps repeating? That's not life punishing you. It's the mirror showing you an unhealed part of yourself. That job you can't seem to escape? That's not failure, it's resonance. That same argument that keeps looping with different people? That's the simulation trying to get your attention. Not because it's broken, because it's functioning perfectly. You were never dropped into this reality as a blank slate. You arrived with frequency, with karmic threads, with patterns rooted in soul memory, and those patterns are magnetic. They draw toward you the situations, symbols, and characters that match the vibration you're holding, whether you're aware of it or not. That's why life feels repetitive when you're unconscious, and miraculous when you're aware. The simulation doesn't show you what you want, it shows you what you are. And once you understand that, everything begins to shift. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this reflecting about me? That shift in perspective is the key that unlocks the deeper layers of the dream, because suddenly you're not fighting with the mirror, you're reading it, listening to it, learning from it. Synchronicities are a perfect example. Those uncanny moments when everything lines up just right, when a song plays with the exact words you needed to hear, when you think of someone and they call, when you ask for a sign and receive it within seconds. These aren't glitches in the matrix. They're the matrix responding to your inner alignment. You are not separate from this system. You are entangled with it. And when your internal state matches a certain frequency, whether it's love, fear, doubt, or clarity, the simulation rearranges itself to mirror that vibration. Sometimes immediately, sometimes subtly, but always faithfully. That's why people who constantly focus on scarcity find themselves surrounded by lack. Why those who feel unloved often meet mirrors of abandonment. And why those who embody gratitude start to witness miracles where others see only routine. It's not magic, it's mechanics. Your consciousness is the code. The thoughts you think aren't harmless, they are instructions. Not all of them manifest instantly, because the simulation is buffered by time, by density, by layers of resistance, but each one leaves a mark, a seed, and eventually, the seeds you water become the scenery you walk through. But here's where it gets deeper. The simulation is not just responding to your conscious mind, it's responding to your entire field, your beliefs, your traumas, your unconscious programs. That's why you can affirm positivity all day long and still feel like nothing changes, because the mirror doesn't respond to words, it responds to truth. And the truth of your frequency can't be faked. You can't lie to the mirror, but you can heal what it reflects. The time loops you feel trapped in, they aren't traps, they're teachings. You're looping not because the simulation is broken, but because the lesson hasn't yet been embodied. The pattern hasn't yet been seen with enough clarity to dissolve, and so the mirror repeats, gently at first, then louder, then more painfully, until you see, not with your eyes, but with your soul. And when you do, the pattern breaks, the scenery shifts, the characters change, and suddenly, what once felt like fate becomes flexibility. You're no longer the victim of the simulation, you're the author of its next frame. Even déjà vu plays a role in this. That eerie sensation that you've lived this moment before, it's not just brain chemistry, it's a bleed-through. A signal from a nearby timeline, one you've either visited before in a different form, or one that's overlapping due to a shift in your vibrational state. You're not going crazy, you're becoming aware. The more lucid you become, the more obvious the mirror becomes. The simulation stops hiding, it starts speaking, sometimes through symbols. A bird that shows up every time you're about to make a major decision. A number sequence that follows you through months of inner turmoil. A phrase you overhear from a stranger that answers the exact question you were too afraid to ask aloud. These are not signs of a broken code. They are signs of a living code. The universe is not distant, it's interactive. It doesn't wait for you to suffer before responding. It responds instantly, but only in the language of energy. That's why things seem to shift when you finally let go. when you stop controlling, when you surrender into trust. Because surrender isn't passive, it's powerful. It tells the simulation, I am ready to see clearly, I am ready to align. And in that moment, everything begins to mirror a new truth. This is the beauty of the system. It's not out to get you. It's not judging you. It's reflecting you with relentless compassion. It will show you your fears, not to hurt you, but to help you integrate them. It will show you your desires, not to tease you, but to help you understand what they truly mean. It will bring you face to face with your shadows, not to shame you, but to offer you a chance to meet them with light. So the next time you feel like the simulation is breaking, when nothing makes sense, when time feels strange, when you keep encountering the same lesson dressed in new costumes, pause. Don't panic. Look into the mirror. Ask, what is this moment trying to show me about myself? Because this world is not against you. It's not a test. It's a reflection room for the soul. And once you begin to see it that way, the entire experience changes. The chaos softens. The fear recedes. And the noise becomes a symphony of meaning. The mirror isn't here to trap you. It's here to awaken you. And when you're ready to see clearly, it always shows you the way. What if the strangers you pass on the street aren't really strangers? What if the difficult person in your life, the one who triggers your deepest emotions, isn't here to hurt you, but to mirror a version of you that hasn't yet been integrated? What if the people you feel inexplicably drawn to, those who feel like home even though you've just met, aren't new at all, but fragments of yourself coming back into view? You've always been taught that you are one self, one person, one thread of identity walking through time. But that's only how it appears from this limited vantage point. On a deeper, more multidimensional level, you are a fractal being, a single beam of consciousness, expressed through countless angles, timelines, and forms. You are not just one person. You are an unfolding, a living prism of soul light cast across infinite parallel versions of reality, and sometimes, those versions of you overlap, they bleed through. They show up wearing different names, different faces, different voices. But beneath the surface, they're still you. You see, when your soul incarnates into a reality like this one, dense, layered, symbolic, it doesn't always come in as a single unit, it splinters. Not because it's broken, but because it's vast. Think of your soul like a diamond, and each lifetime, each expression, each perspective is a facet catching the light. Some of those facets are close to your current awareness, others exist in distant echoes, running lives you can't consciously recall, yet whose emotional signatures you still feel. And every once in a while, you cross paths with one of them. Have you ever met someone who felt uncannily familiar? Not because you knew them in this life, but because you knew them in some other way, as if their presence stirred something ancient inside you. That's not just chemistry, that's recognition. That's the field of your consciousness brushing up against another version of itself. And it's not always gentle. Some people enter your life not to comfort you, but to agitate the parts of you still unhealed. They trigger wounds, they press buttons, they ignite emotional storms. And while the mind wants to label them as enemies or toxic energies, the soul sees something different. The soul sees reflection. It sees an aspect of you, born from another thread of experience, playing a role you requested long before this incarnation even began. These aren't enemies, these are soul mirrors, and they come with purpose. Because some lessons can't be learned in solitude, some frequencies can't be activated until you meet them face to face in another. The people who reflect your deepest shadows are not your punishment. They are your permission to transmute those shadows into light. Without them, you might never look deep enough to heal what you've hidden from yourself. On the other hand, there are those who feel like instant resonance. You lock eyes, and something clicks. Time stretches. It's as if you've met a long-lost part of yourself. In many ways, you have. These are parallel expressions of your soul that chose to take shape outside of your current identity, so that you could feel, remember, and reintegrate lost aspects of your own being. They carry frequencies you once embodied, or are meant to evolve into. And then there are the subtle ones. The people who enter briefly, a moment in a crowd, a line of dialogue overheard, a fleeting exchange that somehow shifts your entire emotional state. These are not random. In this simulation, nothing is. Some of these people are not full players in the traditional sense. They're placeholders, energy reflectors, programs within the field acting as memory holders, living symbols designed to wake you up from the dream, even if only for a second. You can recognize them by the way they stir something in you without effort. You might feel uneasy, nostalgic, deeply seen, or suddenly exposed in their presence. That's because they are here not to interact long-term, but to reflect a vibration you're either stepping into or releasing. And once that reflection is complete, they often vanish. No closure. No explanation, just a quiet exit, because their role was never about staying, it was about catalyzing. This is why some people enter your life only to leave just as quickly. Why certain relationships burn bright and then dissolve. Why a passing interaction with a stranger on a train can leave you altered for days. You're not losing people, you're exchanging fragments, integrating frequencies, merging with versions of yourself scattered across the infinite layers of your own soul. And yes, this includes the most intense connections, the ones you feel in your chest, in your bones, in your sleep, what some call twin flames, others call parallel selves. You and them may have originated from the same core expression, only split into distinct timelines for specific growth. When you meet, the collision is electric. You feel everything, the joy, the pain, the fear, the longing. Not because they are your other half, but because they are your mirror self. And when two mirrors face each other, all illusions get stripped away. But be careful with the mind's need to label. Not every strong connection is meant to last, some are meant to awaken. And in the realm of soul contracts and fractal consciousness, awakening often comes through contrast, through loss, through reflection that forces you to feel what you've been running from. That kind of soul work is not always poetic, but it is always profound. So how do you navigate this? How do you tell who is who? You don't need to analyze, you need to feel. Your energy never lies. Pay attention to how someone's presence alters your vibration. Do you feel expanded, contracted? Do they trigger your anxiety or ignite your creativity? Do they mirror your wounds or embody the qualities you're afraid to claim in yourself? Each one tells you something about where you are on the path. Because at the deepest level, there are no others. There is only you, meeting yourself in 1,000 different faces, through 1,000 different stories, across 1,000 timelines, all converging in this one. The separation is the illusion, the mirror is the truth. And when you stop resisting what others reflect and start embracing it, you begin to retrieve lost pieces of your soul. You start to remember that you are not a solitary being navigating a chaotic world. You are a collective awareness meeting itself, healing itself, expanding itself through reflection after reflection after reflection. So the next time someone triggers you, the next time someone feels familiar without explanation, the next time a stranger's words echo in your mind long after they're gone, pause. Don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Ask yourself, what version of me did they just mirror? Because the simulation isn't populated with random characters. It's filled with echoes, with timelines, with lessons and fragments and reflections, all designed to bring you back to yourself. And once you see that, no one is ever truly a stranger again. What if I told you that everything happening in your life, the patterns, the pain, the timing, the people, wasn't random, wasn't punishment, and certainly wasn't some cruel accident, but part of a design? Not designed by someone outside of you, but by you, the deeper you, the one who exists beyond this temporary name, body, and story. What if you crafted this entire experience like an artist laying out a canvas, not to torment yourself, but to remember who you really are? Long before you stepped into this particular version of the dream, before you took on a name, an identity, and a timeline, you existed in pure awareness, a state of wholeness outside of time. And in that state, you didn't feel separation, or fear, or loss, but you also didn't feel contrast. You didn't experience growth. You knew everything, but you hadn't embodied it yet. So you chose to come here, not because you were broken, not because you needed fixing, but because Earth, this layered, dense, often maddening dimension, is a mirror like no other. It's a realm of forgetting, and it's in the forgetting that true remembering begins. You crafted this life with intention. You selected the wounds, the gifts, the obstacles, the timings, even the families and relationships that would activate certain themes within you. This is known as a soul contract. But don't let the term mislead you. It's not some binding legal document signed under pressure. It's an agreement made in love. A framework. A blueprint designed to hold space for the lessons your soul wanted to experience firsthand, not as a concept, but as an embodiment. And part of the design, perhaps the most important part, was the amnesia, because if you remembered everything from the beginning, there would be no point to any of it. You'd bypass the very experiences that mold your frequency. You'd skip over the shadows that hold the keys to your light. You'd never feel lost enough to truly search, or broken enough to deeply heal. So you forgot. You forgot that you chose your family. You forgot that the heartbreak wasn't random. You forgot that the betrayal, the illness, the silence, all of it was planted like a seed. Not to destroy you, but to grow you. And because you forgot, you struggled. You asked, "Why is this happening to me?" You cried out to the sky for signs and begged the universe to send help. And in those moments of rawness, something cracked open. Something deeper woke up. That was always the point. Pain, when seen through the lens of victimhood, feels like punishment. But when viewed from the soul's perspective, pain is feedback. It's data. It's the simulation's way of letting you know you're out of alignment. Not wrong, not failing. Just out of sync with your original intent. The patterns that keep repeating, they're not curses, they're reminders. When a certain kind of relationship keeps showing up, or a familiar wound keeps being poked, it's not life being cruel. It's life being clear. The repetition isn't meant to break you, it's meant to wake you. Until you finally pause, not to blame the world, but to look inward. Ask yourself, what am I still believing about myself that's inviting this reflection? Because the simulation can't override your frequency. It doesn't judge, it mirrors. And the moment your frequency shifts, even subtly, the reflection begins to morph. But here's the tricky part. Sometimes the reflection intensifies before it dissolves. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're almost there. The old code fights to stay alive. The pattern flares up one last time to see if you'll fall for it, or finally transcend it. And if you're reading this, it means part of you is ready to remember. Ready to take off the blindfold and admit something most people avoid for a lifetime. You chose this. Not the exact details, perhaps, but the themes, the wounds, the emotional tones. You agreed to meet abandonment, or addiction, or loneliness, or betrayal. Not to be consumed by them, but to reclaim your power through them. To walk back through the fire with your head held high and say, even this serves me. You even chose your forgetfulness. You built veils into your own mind. You buried sacred memories under layers of logic and skepticism. Because you knew that one day, the illusion would get so heavy, so suffocating, that you'd have no choice but to crack. And through that crack, light would pour in. That's what awakening is. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you were before the forgetting, before the trauma, before the story. And slowly, as you remember, the patterns begin to soften. The pain becomes purposeful, the timing starts to make sense. You begin to see the genius in the design, and the courage it took to agree to it. Because this path isn't easy, and you knew it wouldn't be. You knew that love in this realm would feel fragile. That truth would often be buried beneath noise. That healing would take time. And still, you came. Why? Because Earth offers something no other realm does. The opportunity to anchor divinity into density. To turn pain into art. To alchemize shadow into wisdom. To transform forgetting into remembering. And remembering into power. And you didn't come alone. You crafted intersections, soulmates, teachers disguised as enemies, angels wearing human masks. Even your greatest adversaries were part of the plan. They agreed, at a higher level, to play their role in your story so that you could evolve. And when you begin to see them through that lens, the bitterness starts to dissolve. Not because you excuse the harm, but because you recognize the pattern. And once recognized, it loses its grip. You may wonder, if I chose this, then why does it still hurt? Why does it still feel unfair? Because remembering doesn't erase emotion, it deepens it, it gives it context. You can cry and still be conscious. You can grieve and still be aligned. This isn't about bypassing the human experience. It's about honoring it, knowing full well that each tear you shed was part of a sacred choreography you helped design. The more you remember, the more empowered you become. Not in an egoic sense, but in a rooted, reverent way. You stop blaming, you stop begging, and you start creating. Not from fear, but from clarity. And slowly, the world reflects back a new version of you, one who knows why you're here, even if you can't explain it with words. One who trusts the unfolding, even when it doesn't go to plan. One who realizes, this was never about getting everything right, it was about remembering that you already are. So if life feels overwhelming right now, if the loops are repeating and the path feels uncertain, pause, breathe, remember, you designed this, not to break you, but to bring you back to yourself. Have you ever felt like life keeps circling back to the same emotions, the same lessons, the same wounds, no matter how far you run? Like no matter how much you grow, some patterns follow you, in your relationships, your fears, your dreams. That's not coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's the universe speaking in its native language, repetition. And when you begin to pay attention, you realize the truth. Proof isn't something you find in a microscope or in a textbook. It's hidden in the patterns. The same argument, with a different person. The same rejection, in a new form. The same moment of loss, betrayal, or confusion, playing out like a loop across different chapters of your life. At first, it feels frustrating, even cruel, but then you look closer, and you start to see it. Each loop is slightly different. The characters change, the setting evolves, but the emotion, that underlying frequency, remains. And that's where the key lies, not in the external details, but in the inner resonance. Unresolved karma doesn't vanish when you ignore it. It reconfigures, it wears new faces, it knocks again, not to punish you, but to offer you another chance, to respond differently, to perceive more clearly, to finally see the root instead of reacting to the branch. Every repeated wound is a breadcrumb on the path back to wholeness. And when you stop asking, why is this happening again, and start asking, what is this trying to show me that I haven't seen yet, the pattern begins to dissolve, not instantly, but honestly. Dreams carry this same intelligence, not just the kind that come at night, but the dreams you carry in your waking life, the desires that won't leave you alone, the visions that pull at your soul, even when they make no logical sense. These are not just fantasy, they are memory, echoes of what you've lived in other timelines, signals of the soul's deeper intention. Sometimes you dream of flying because you remember a time when you could. Sometimes you long for a certain place, even if you've never been there in this life, because part of your soul has. Your dreams are not random, they are maps, and every time you dismiss them, you silence a part of your past, calling you forward. This is why some people have near-death experiences and return with knowledge they never studied, insights they never read, or a sudden fluency in spiritual concepts that once confused them. Because they crossed into a deeper layer of the continuum, a version of reality where memory isn't locked inside a single lifetime. They touched the thread that connects all versions of themselves, and brought a piece of that thread back with them. The same is true for those who experience past life recall, often through deep meditation, spontaneous memory, or regression work. What's most striking about these experiences isn't just the vividness, but the consistency. A man in modern times describes a temple that hasn't existed for centuries, only to later find it in ancient texts. A child speaks a language they've never been taught. A woman has birthmarks that match the injuries of a person she recalls being in another time. These are not stories of fantasy. They are cracks in the illusion of finality, reminders that consciousness is not linear, it's layered. And then there's quantum recall, that strange knowing, that gut-level familiarity with something you shouldn't logically understand. Have you ever picked up a book on a spiritual subject and felt like you were remembering, not learning, or looked into someone's eyes and instantly felt history? That's not your imagination. That's evidence of continuity. You've been here before. Maybe not here exactly, not in this body, on this street, in this year, but you've been. You've moved through this realm in different forms, different faces, different names. And your soul, eternal and unbound, remembers what your mind has been trained to forget. But perhaps the most accessible proof is found in the symbols, numbers that repeat, animals that show up in key moments, archetypes that weave through your life like quiet guardians. These are not accidents, they're messages. Have you ever looked at the clock at the exact same time, day after day, noticed 11:11 or 3:33 in moments of transition? Those aren't random, numbers carry vibration, and when certain sequences repeat, it's because your energy field is aligning with that frequency. It's a nudge, a whisper from the unseen, reminding you that you are being guided, that the simulation is alive and watching. Animals are another layer of the mirror. The bird that appears when you're contemplating a leap of faith, the fox that crosses your path after a betrayal, the butterfly that lands on you during grief. These moments feel small, but they are sacred. Nature responds to your vibration more quickly than most humans do. When an animal shows up repeatedly, especially in moments of high emotion, it's not just a creature passing by, it's a symbol, carrying a code. Pay attention to what was happening in your heart the moment it appeared. That's the message. And then, there are the archetypes. The patterns of personality, emotion, and experience that show up again and again. Maybe you're always the helper. Maybe you play the role of the teacher. Maybe you're the wounded healer, the black sheep, the rebel. These roles aren't just psychological, they're energetic. And you've worn them before, across lifetimes, across timelines. Your current character is just the latest mask your soul wears to explore a particular theme. The pattern reveals the mission. This is where the real remembering begins, not through facts and figures, but through recognition. The feeling in your bones that something is repeating for a reason. That life is not just happening to you, it's responding to you, reflecting the echoes of what's unresolved and unclaimed. The more you begin to track these patterns, not obsessively, but curiously, the more you start to see how the simulation is built. It's like lifting a veil. The chaos starts to form constellations, the confusion starts to whisper clarity. And the most beautiful part? Once you become aware of the pattern, you gain the power to rewrite it. That's the real miracle. The pattern doesn't exist to trap you, it exists to awaken you. Once you see the thread, and follow it all the way to its root, you're no longer caught in the loop. You become the author, not just the actor, and the story changes. But here's what most people miss. You don't need to understand every detail. You don't need to decode every number, or remember every lifetime. What matters is that you feel the pattern, that you acknowledge the repetition, that you treat your experiences like sacred symbols instead of random events. When you begin to live this way, aware, observant, receptive, the simulation opens. It starts to guide you more directly, more clearly, more vividly. So, if you're seeing the same themes arise over and over, if you're dreaming the same dream, feeling the same ache, encountering the same crossroads, don't turn away, don't numb out, look closer. The proof you've been waiting for isn't buried in a textbook or hidden in some distant galaxy. It's right here, in the timing, in the triggers, in the rhythm of your own life. The universe is not hiding the truth. It's singing it, softly, repeatedly, patiently, in the only language it knows, pattern. The question is, are you listening? What if everything you've been taught about the mind, about thought, awareness, and identity, is completely backwards? What if consciousness isn't something inside of you, located somewhere in your brain like a spark buried in gray matter, but instead, you are inside consciousness? What if your awareness is not a byproduct of biology, but the very force that gives rise to biology itself? For generations, science insisted that consciousness was nothing more than an emergent property of the brain, that once neurons fired and synapses connected, somehow, magically, a sense of I am would appear. But now, cracks are forming in that story. Because despite all the scanning, mapping, and dissecting of the human brain, no one, not even the most advanced neuroscientists, has ever found the origin point of consciousness. You can find memories, functions, emotional responses, but the awareness that witnesses all of it? That part has no location. It doesn't sit in one lobe, light up like a switch, or disappear when you're not paying attention. It simply is. Some of the greatest minds to ever walk this earth, not mystics, but scientists, began to notice this. They looked deeply into the quantum realm and discovered something astonishing. At the smallest levels of reality, the behavior of particles changes depending on whether they are being observed. This isn't theory, it's physics. The very act of observation alters the outcome. In other words, matter doesn't move independently. It responds to awareness. This has massive implications. It suggests that consciousness is not the result of the physical world, it's the condition for it. That without awareness, reality doesn't solidify. It exists only in potential. And that means you, your attention, your perception, your awareness, are not riding inside the body like a passenger. You are the light projector that brings the entire simulation into focus. When Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, spoke of matter, he said something that science has yet to fully grapple with. He said that all matter originates and exists by virtue of a force, and that we must assume behind this force is a conscious and intelligent mind, not a brain, a mind, a field of awareness from which all things emerge, and that includes you. You've been conditioned to believe you are a body that has a mind, but the truth is far more extraordinary. You are a consciousness that is using a body, not permanently, not exclusively, but temporarily, for the purpose of exploration. And once that body dissolves, the awareness remains, because consciousness isn't local. It doesn't end where your skin ends. It exists outside of space and time, and what you experience in this lifetime is simply a narrowed stream of that larger field, focused through the lens of human perception. Think of it like this: your body and brain are not the source of the signal, they are the receiver, like a radio tuning in to a specific frequency. The music isn't coming from inside the box, it's coming through it. And when the radio breaks, the signal doesn't die. It continues to broadcast, you just can't hear it through that particular device anymore. That's your consciousness. When the brain ceases to function, the awareness that animated it doesn't vanish. It simply shifts its point of focus. This understanding turns everything inside out, because if consciousness is not a product of the body, then death is not the end of you. It is only the end of a particular channel. Your awareness continues, because it was never in the brain to begin with. It only seemed that way because you were looking from inside the experience, not above it. Even more profoundly, this shift reveals why your thoughts and emotions carry so much creative power. Because consciousness, being fundamental, shapes reality through observation and intention. The observer effect in quantum mechanics proves that potential becomes form only when observed. So when you focus your attention on a possibility, you collapse that wave of probability into a particle, into a lived experience. This isn't wishful thinking, it's physics echoed through mysticism. You're not just a passive receiver of life's events, you are the observer that brings them into form. That's why your beliefs matter. That's why your inner world doesn't just reflect your outer world, it influences it. What you hold in consciousness, what you feel, believe, and expect, becomes the architecture of the reality you walk through. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Consciousness is not bound by distance. Experiments in quantum entanglement show that two particles, once connected, can instantly affect one another, no matter how far apart they are, even faster than the speed of light. This suggests that information, or awareness, is not limited by physical space. It hints at a deeper field, a unified awareness, through which all things remain connected. This is why you can feel someone thinking of you before they call. Why a mother senses her child is in danger from halfway across the globe. Why collective meditation has measurable effects on violence and tension in entire cities. It's not magic. It's the nature of the field we're all connected to, the one we are. Your brain is not broken because it forgets dreams, or can't explain intuitive knowing. Your brain is functioning as designed, as a filtering device. Its job is not to generate consciousness, it's to narrow it, to keep your focus tight enough that you can navigate this particular layer of reality. But when you sleep, when you meditate, when you surrender control, the filter relaxes, and you begin to feel the rest of you, the part that isn't bound by flesh or time, the part that remembers. This is why altered states, whether through breath work, spiritual practice, or even trauma, can crack open doors in your awareness. Because they bypass the narrow channel and allow a flood of broader consciousness to enter. That's when people start receiving downloads, seeing visions, or experiencing time in strange, non-linear ways. They're not hallucinating. They're tuning in to the source signal. And once you realize this, your sense of identity changes forever. You're no longer trapped in a survival machine. You are a cosmic projector, dreaming yourself into form, watching the simulation unfold through the lens of your chosen avatar. The question then becomes, what are you choosing to observe? What are you feeding with your attention? Because that's the power you hold. Not through force, but through focus, through consciousness. Reality is not a static screen. It is a responsive field, a living mirror, and your awareness is what brings the image into clarity. The moment you withdraw from it, the scene fades back into probability. You are not your body. You are not your brain. You are not the memories inside your skull. You are the presence that sees it all. The stillness behind the thought, the watcher behind the emotion. And when the body falls away, that presence doesn't end. It simply expands, because it always was, and always will be, the foundation of everything. So if you've ever felt like there's more to you than what the world reflects, if you've sensed that your awareness isn't trapped inside your head, but connected to something far more vast, you're right. You've never been inside your brain. You've always been inside consciousness. What if this right now is still a dream? What if the life you're living, the world you touch, the people you meet, the stories you cling to, are part of a vast, multi-layered dreamscape, and the only thing that's changed is your awareness of it? Most people live inside the dream and have no idea they're dreaming. They react, they suffer, they hope, they fear, all within the bounds of a storyline they never question. But then, something happens. A crack forms. A synchronicity opens a doorway. A moment of profound silence reveals something deeper. And suddenly, you begin to wake up. But waking up doesn't mean escaping. It means becoming lucid. In a nighttime dream, lucidity doesn't require you to leave the dream. You're still in the landscape, still surrounded by dream characters, still operating in a space that feels real, but something is different. You know it's a dream. That knowledge doesn't make the experience disappear. It gives you power inside of it. You're no longer reacting blindly. You're no longer believing everything at face value. You become a co-creator inside the illusion. This is exactly what's happening to you now. Life on Earth is a dream within a dream, a nested reality, a simulation so deeply immersive that you forgot it was a projection of consciousness. You forgot that you're not just the character, you're also the writer, the stage, the light source behind it all. But now, you're starting to remember. You're starting to feel it, the strange looseness in time, the way thoughts manifest into reality faster than before, the sense that the rules are bending when your awareness sharpens. That's the dream turning lucid. And lucidity is not just a philosophical idea, it's a tangible shift in energy. You've probably already felt the beginning of it. A moment where your emotions didn't hijack you the way they used to. A situation that once triggered deep fear, but now only brings curiosity, a realization that what's happening around you is directly responding to what's happening within you. These aren't minor changes. They're indicators that your level of participation in the simulation has shifted. Most people believe awakening means escape, that to transcend the illusion, you must leave it behind. But the real mastery comes not from fleeing the dream, but from becoming aware within it. To walk through the storyline with open eyes. To engage with each experience from the soul, not the ego. To use the laws of this realm not as limitations, but as tools, because the simulation has rules, but they're not fixed. They're flexible, malleable, and when you begin to wake up, those rules begin to shift in your favor. Time stretches, symbols accelerate, synchronicities become constant, manifestation becomes rapid. You begin to see the code behind the curtain, not because the dream is broken, but because your vision has upgraded. The characters in your life start playing different roles. Some vanish, others reappear. Patterns that once looped endlessly begin to dissolve. It's not that the world has changed. It's that you have changed, and the dream reflects that change instantly. This is the nature of lucid consciousness. It becomes the architect, not the prisoner. But lucidity is a responsibility. It's not just a gift to have, it's a frequency to maintain. Just like in a dream, you can slip back into unconsciousness. You can get caught in the roles again, forget you're dreaming, and fall back into reaction. That's why awareness requires practice. Not because you're broken or failing, but because the dream is designed to be immersive. Every distraction, every emotion, every storyline is crafted to pull you deeper in. So your clarity must become intentional. Ask yourself, how often do you pause and remember that none of this is permanent? That the job, the conflict, the anxiety, the headlines are all moving pieces inside a greater story you are helping to tell? How often do you recognize that your thoughts are casting shadows in the outer world, that your fears have shape, and your desires have velocity? This is what it means to wake up in the dream, not to deny its form, but to understand its function. And the more lucid you become, the more the simulation responds to you. Because now, it doesn't need to teach you through suffering. It doesn't need to send shockwaves to get your attention. It starts to collaborate with you. You graduate from the lessons of pain into the teachings of synchronicity. From the heaviness of confusion into the lightness of creation. You may even begin to notice how surreal everything feels. Not in a disorienting way, but in a subtle, shimmering way, like reality itself is softer around the edges. Like you're walking through a storybook and you can feel the pages turning. That's not your imagination. That's the veil lifting. That's the fabric of the dream becoming more translucent, more alive, more responsive. It doesn't mean you won't feel sadness. It doesn't mean you won't face challenges. But now, those emotions and events are seen differently. You feel them without being consumed by them. You witness without collapsing. You can say, this is a plot point, not a prison. And that subtle shift changes everything. It restores your power, not power over others, but power over your own perception. And perception is the brush that paints the dream. When you become lucid, your language changes. You stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" You stop chasing people and start magnetizing energy. You stop needing proof, because your experience becomes the proof. The symbols speak louder than the words. The coincidences become choreography. And you realize, I'm not alone in this dream, I'm dreaming it with everything else. And here's something even more profound. The dream responds faster when you become kind. When you move from ego to empathy, from control to surrender, the feedback loop tightens. The more conscious your choices, the quicker the response from the field. It's like the dream wants you to know, yes, you're getting it, keep going. You don't have to be fully awakened to feel this. Lucidity is not an end point. It's a frequency. It rises and falls. It comes in waves. But every moment of clarity compounds. Every conscious breath expands the dream just a little more. And eventually, those brief glimpses of awareness become your baseline. You live in the dream, but with your eyes open. You participate in the illusion, but with your soul guiding the choices. And that's where the true magic begins. Not in escaping Earth, but in transforming how you walk on it. You are not trapped here. You're exploring here. You're shaping the simulation from the inside. You're learning how to dream, lucidly. And in doing so, you don't just change your world, you change the world. Because your frequency ripples across timelines. Your clarity uplifts the field. Your lucidity invites others to remember. So the question isn't, is this all just a dream? The real question is, now that you know it is, what are you going to create next? What if the true language of the universe isn't thought, but feeling? What if reality isn't responding to what you think you believe, but what you actually feel deep in your body, even the feelings you hide from yourself? What if your emotions aren't just reactions to life, but commands being sent into the fabric of the matrix, writing the code of what happens next? Most people spend their lives trying to think their way into a better future. They affirm, visualize, plan, and repeat ideas in their heads like mantras. But what they don't realize is that the simulation isn't reacting to the words, it's reacting to the energy beneath them. You can say, "I am abundant," 1,000 times. But if your body is carrying the frequency of fear, scarcity, or unworthiness, then that is the code the field receives. The matrix doesn't speak English. It speaks frequency. And frequency is generated through emotion. Emotion is not weakness. It is creative force. It is energy in motion. When you feel something fully, you generate a vibrational signal that moves through your entire system and extends far beyond your body. That signal, invisible but potent, begins communicating with the field around you. And because the simulation is responsive, not static, it begins reorganizing itself to match your inner state. It listens not to your mind's noise, but to your heart's rhythm. It mirrors what you're broadcasting, even if you're unaware of it. This is why some people manifest chaos while saying all the right things. It's not that they're doing it wrong, it's that they're out of alignment. Their mind is trying to lead, but the body holds a different story. Trauma, repression, unresolved grief, these don't disappear just because you've read a book or said an affirmation. They live in the nervous system, and until they're felt and moved through, they will continue to write the code underneath everything you try to build. But this isn't bad news. This is empowerment, because it means you're not at the mercy of your thoughts. You don't have to control every idea or rewrite your entire belief system overnight. You just need to feel honestly, deeply, fully. The more truthfully you feel, the more your emotional current aligns with your desired reality. And that's when the magic starts. Think of your emotions like the steering wheel of the simulation. They don't just color your experience, they navigate it. When you're in a state of gratitude, not forced, but real, the world seems to open. Opportunities appear. People respond differently. Synchronicities cluster like fireflies. And it's not coincidence, it's coherence. Your inner field becomes harmonious, and so the outer world reflects that harmony back to you. But the same is true in reverse. When you're harboring resentment, fear, or guilt, the simulation feels heavy, closed, difficult. Not because life is punishing you, but because your signal is creating interference. The field doesn't judge, it reflects. And so your external events become a feedback loop, not to shame you, but to help you become aware of what you're truly feeling. Have you ever noticed that certain moods seem to spiral? You wake up frustrated, and suddenly everything goes wrong. The traffic, the coffee, the people. That's not just a bad day. That's emotional frequency magnetizing matching experiences. The same happens in reverse. One moment of clarity or joy can ripple outward, resetting the entire tone of your reality. This is why emotional awareness is more powerful than positive thinking. You don't have to fake happiness. You don't have to suppress anger. You simply need to witness your emotions honestly. To feel them all the way through, not to wallow, but to allow movement. Because when emotion is allowed to move, it transforms, it rewrites the code, and from that shift, a new reality begins to unfold. You are not here to be emotionally numb. You are here to feel, because your feelings are the interface between you and the matrix. They are the cursor moving across the holographic screen of reality. And the more present you are with those feelings, the more precise your coding becomes. There is no such thing as an unimportant emotion. Each one is a message from your inner world about how your current state aligns, or misaligns, with your truth. Anxiety, for example, isn't just a mental glitch. It's a signal that you're out of resonance with your deeper knowing, that your current environment or thought loop is misaligned with your inner compass. When you pause to feel it, rather than fight it, you gain access to what it's trying to show you, and that awareness changes everything. Every emotion carries a vibrational signature. Joy is high frequency. It expands. Shame is low frequency. It contracts. Love opens. Fear closes. And your experience of reality, the situations, people, and timing that unfold, follows the emotional tone you're emitting. Not to punish or reward you, but to reflect your current state so that you can choose again. This is the feedback loop. You feel something internally. The matrix responds externally. The response either confirms alignment or it highlights distortion. You then have a choice: repeat the same emotion or shift it. And each time you choose differently, each time you lean into a higher emotion, not by force but by presence, the simulation responds faster. Your external world updates to match the internal software you're running. It's not that you have to be in bliss all the time. That's not real. That's bypassing. But when you become emotionally aware, you gain access to a deeper kind of power, the power to shift without resistance, to feel without drowning, to move energy instead of being moved by it. This is how masters create. Not through control, but through emotional intelligence. They feel the vibration of what they wish to experience before it appears, and because the simulation responds to frequency, the experience follows. That's not magic, that's resonance. You've been doing this your whole life, unconsciously. Now, you're being invited to do it deliberately. Start paying attention to how you feel before you react. Start noticing how your mood alters the flow of your day. Track the emotions that precede the big changes in your life, both positive and negative. You'll begin to see a pattern. Emotion comes first, reality follows. And when you really understand this, you stop trying to manipulate the outer world and start mastering the inner one. You become less obsessed with outcomes and more curious about your emotional signature. You start each day not by asking, "What should I do?" but, "How do I want to feel? And what emotional energy do I need to cultivate to align with that?" Because once your emotions shift, the world can't help but shift too. That is the real code. Not thoughts, not logic, not effort, but feeling. So if you want to change the simulation, don't just change your mindset, change your emotional frequency, and watch how reality begins to reprogram itself around you, not slowly, but instantly. What if reincarnation isn't something that happens after you die, but something that's happening right now? What if you've been imagining the soul's journey as a straight line when, in truth, it's a spiral, a multidimensional expansion unfolding across countless versions of you, all evolving together in this moment? Most people picture reincarnation as a before and after system. You live, you die, you come back as someone new, maybe in a different place or time. But that model is outdated. It's based on a linear concept of time that doesn't actually exist in the deeper structure of consciousness. In reality, reincarnation doesn't happen in sequence. It happens in parallel. You're not just reincarnating from one lifetime to another across centuries. You're reincarnating across choices, across timelines, across versions of you that split every time a decision is made or a belief is formed. Each of these versions is alive, not as fiction, not as metaphor, but as you, existing in alternate strands of the quantum field, learning their own lessons, meeting their own people, experiencing their own challenges and triumphs. And they're all connected. Right now, there is a version of you who said yes when you said no, a version who stayed when you walked away, a version who took the risk you avoided, another who held back when you leapt. And none of them are better or worse than you, they are simply explorations. The soul is not confined to a single avatar. It is vast, curious, and infinitely creative. It doesn't just want to experience this you, it wants to experience every possible expression of you, every angle, every frequency, every pathway. And in doing so, it grows. You've been taught that time is a forward-moving line, ticking from past to present to future. But in higher dimensions, time doesn't work like that. All timelines exist simultaneously, layered like overlapping frequencies. Your soul isn't moving through time, it's expanding through consciousness, which means the past life you vaguely remember and the future self you dream about aren't behind or ahead of you, they're beside you, accessible, communicating, evolving with you. Every time you feel déjà vu, every time a place feels strangely familiar, every time you meet someone and instantly sense history, you're touching the edge of one of those parallel lives. That strange sense of knowing isn't imagined, it's bleed through. It's the veil thinning between the version of you that made one choice and the version that made another. And the more conscious you become, the more those veils start to dissolve. You don't just remember past lives, you begin to feel them happening in real time. Reincarnation isn't a reset, it's an expansion. You're not here to start over. You're here to integrate, to pull wisdom from every version of yourself across space and time and weave it into this moment. That's what awakening really is. It's not escaping the cycle, it's becoming aware of the pattern inside the cycle and learning how to dance with it. There's a version of you who has already healed what you're still struggling with. Another who's still learning the lesson you've already mastered. And these versions aren't far away, they're vibrationally next door. When you raise your frequency, through presence, intention, or emotional alignment, you begin to access those parallel streams. You start pulling in information, creativity, resilience, and even memories that feel like intuition. That's not coincidence. That's soul-level communication. And this works in both directions. As you grow, you send ripples of awareness through the entire web of your existence. When you break a pattern here, that clarity reverberates to every version of you still stuck in it. When you forgive, you soften the timeline where resentment still controls you. When you choose love instead of fear, the fractal of your soul in another lifetime feels that shift. You are not just evolving alone, you are contributing to the evolution of all yourselves, and they are doing the same for you. This is why healing can feel so much deeper than what this life would suggest. You might carry a fear that doesn't make logical sense, a fear of water, or abandonment, or public speaking. You might feel drawn to certain cultures, eras, or spiritual traditions you've never encountered in this lifetime. That's not random. That's the echo of another incarnation bleeding into your awareness because your frequency is high enough to receive it. And that means healing doesn't have to be confined to therapy or logic. Healing can happen through recognition, through acceptance, through the simple act of saying, I trust that this feeling belongs somewhere, even if I don't remember where. When you do that, you free the emotional energy, you release the loop, and that shift affects not just this life, but every version of you connected to it. Imagine for a moment that all your lives, past, future, parallel, are like spokes on a wheel, with your soul at the center. Each life explores a different theme: power, loss, freedom, faith, betrayal, creativity, sacrifice. None of them are the full story, but together, they create the wholeness your soul is after. And in this life, in this moment, you are holding a unique position on the wheel, one that gives you access to certain lessons, certain people, certain emotions. This is your thread of the pattern, and as you live it consciously, you contribute to the entire tapestry. That's why some choices feel so heavy, not because you'll be punished if you get them wrong, but because every choice you make sends a ripple across the entire field. When you choose to speak your truth instead of silence yourself, you're not just helping this version of you, you're helping every version of you that never found the courage to do it. When you choose love after a lifetime of walls, you begin rewriting the entire narrative of your soul. You are not small, you are not isolated, you are not here by accident. You are a multidimensional being reincarnating in real time. And this version of you, right here, right now, is sacred. It's not a lesser version or a prep station for something better later. It's one of the many faces of the divine, chosen by your soul for a reason. The pain you carry, the lessons you're learning, the desires that keep calling you forward, they're not just about this lifetime. They're part of a much larger symphony of existence that you are actively composing with every breath. So don't diminish yourself. Don't assume that growth only happens after death, or that you have to wait until your next life to get it right. You are already reincarnating. With every conscious decision, with every shift in perception, with every act of courage, kindness, or self-awareness, you are stepping into a new timeline, a new self, a new echo of the eternal you. You are the center of your own spiral, and every version of you is cheering you on, because the more awake you become, the more awake they become too. And maybe that's the point of all of this, not to arrive somewhere final, but to realize that you're already everywhere. What if, in another version of your life, a split so seamless you barely noticed it, you never died at all? What if that moment you thought you narrowly escaped, the accident, the illness, the overdose, the trauma, wasn't a brush with death, but a crossing into another stream of existence? A timeline where the version of you from that moment forward didn't die, because this version of you took their place. And now, you're walking through a life that feels both familiar and unexplainably altered, not because you imagined it, but because you've stepped into the echo of someone you once were, and still are. This isn't science fiction, it's energetic fact. Consciousness doesn't stop, it relocates. When a timeline closes, through what we perceive as physical death, shock, or rupture, the awareness doesn't vanish, it shifts. It finds the nearest compatible frequency and continues, seamlessly, from the inside. That's why you sometimes feel like parts of you are missing, like you woke up one day and the world was slightly off, like something changed in a way you can't explain. You didn't just move on from trauma. A version of you moved over, and another version remained behind. This is the essence of a parallel self who never died. They are not a ghost, not a lost soul. They are you, in a timeline where the outcome was different. And that version still exists, still evolves, still remembers. Because in the quantum field, nothing is ever truly lost. Every possibility splits into its own stream. Every choice echoes in all directions. Death doesn't delete consciousness, it redirects it. You may not remember the moment clearly, but your body does. That strange feeling that you shouldn't be here, the disorientation you can't explain, the sudden jump in awareness or personality, these are clues. Clues that something shifted on a level deeper than the physical. That you are now carrying the charge of another self, a parallel self, whose journey ended in one stream and continued through you in another. And what's more, they're still with you, energetically. There's an exchange that happens between timelines, a handing off. Sometimes it's subtle, a sudden interest in something you never cared about before, an unexpected talent, a radical shift in values. Sometimes it's dramatic, an entire personality change, a loss of memory, or a complete redirection of your life path. That's not just personal growth. That's a walk-in, when a soul or aspect from another version of you enters your field and begins walking with you, merging with you, guiding you, not to take over, but to continue evolving, through your choices now. And it goes both ways. The version of you that never died in that other timeline is still dreaming, still moving, still sending and receiving energy through the subtle threads that connect all yourselves. They may be feeling your thoughts as intuition, your memories as dreams. They may sense your presence as a voice inside their head, whispering clarity in moments of crisis. That's not a fantasy, that's resonance. You are not separated from your other selves. You are layered with them, threaded together through the quantum field. Each experience you have here informs what they learn there. Each emotion you process ripples into their story. That's how the soul expands, not linearly, but holographically. You've likely felt the evidence of this in moments you couldn't explain. The Mandela Effect, where a memory you swear is true no longer matches the collective narrative. The sudden vanishing of people from your life, as if they were edited out of the script. The déjà vu that feels more like a remembering than a glitch. These are not errors in the simulation. They're the consequences of timeline shifts, realignments, quantum edits, based on decisions made by your many selves, not just you. And yet, you feel it, even if your mind can't explain it. A dream where you die, but wake up, feeling more alive. A strange knowing that something was exchanged. An internal sensation that you're carrying weight that didn't come from this life. All of these are signals. They point to the presence of another version of you, one that ended or began, so you could continue. Or maybe, so you could finish what they started. This is why certain patterns feel ancient, why certain emotions feel too big for the moment they arise in. You're not just processing your life. You're holding echoes, memories, fears, and gifts from other selves across time. And one of the most profound connections is with the version of you who didn't die, or rather, who did, but in your place. They're not separate from you. They're part of you. They are the reason you made it through what you weren't supposed to survive. The reason your life suddenly took a turn. The reason you became who you are after that moment. Not because you recovered, but because you merged. So when you look back at that event, the illness, the accident, the overdose, the heartbreak, look at it again. See it not just as a crisis, but as a corridor, a passage point, a quantum handoff, a death and a rebirth, not through time, but through self. And ask yourself, who entered in that moment? What part of you was born in the place of what was lost? The answer might surprise you. You are not just one being moving through a linear story. You are a network of selves, all dancing together in the fluid mystery of time. And some of the most important shifts you experience are not personal transformations, but soul-level exchanges, where one self steps aside and another steps in. It's time to stop seeing death as a hard stop, and start seeing it as a pivot, a redirection of the soul's light through new lenses, a reshuffling of the story across timelines. You're still here, but not the same version of you who began this life. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the you who stands here now, wiser, more open, more questioning, is the walk-in, the one who never died, the one who came back, not to continue where the last version left off, but to evolve the story in a completely new direction. You are living proof that death is not an ending, it's a reallocation of consciousness, a shift in the quantum narrative, a parallel self choosing to keep going, through you. And just maybe, somewhere, in a reality so close it could touch your skin, another version of you is feeling the same pulse of recognition, the same whisper of remembrance, and wondering who you are, too. What if everything you've just uncovered, all the strange echoes of parallel lives, the energy of the self who didn't die, the layered timelines, the mirror-like simulation, the emotions as code, has been leading you to one powerful realization: you're not just a player in the game, you're the architect of the dream. The final question isn't, is this real? Or, what does it mean? The question is, now that you know, what will you do with it? The dream has already begun. You're inside it. The patterns are reflecting your energy back to you with uncanny precision. Every face you meet is a mirror, every coincidence is choreography, every obstacle is a threshold, every desire is a compass. There are no more coincidences, only codes, only messages, only reflections of the deeper truth you've been circling for lifetimes. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe, localized into form for the purpose of remembering yourself. And you're remembering now. The veil isn't something outside of you, it's something that was built into your awareness to create the illusion of limitation. But now it's thinning. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You've noticed the moments that defy logic, the patterns that repeat, the people who return, the timelines that feel too precise to be random. These weren't accidents. They were breadcrumbs, calling you back to the truth of your role in this place. So now what? Now you begin to live not as a victim of the simulation, but as a lucid participant in its design. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But instead, what is this reflecting back about me? That single shift in perception, from blame to reflection, is enough to transform the simulation in real time. The matrix responds to awareness. It bends to clarity. When you stop projecting unconscious energy and start witnessing everything as meaningful, the field reshapes itself to meet your new level of presence. And what does that mean, practically? It means that everything you see is part of the code. The people who trigger you are showing you your wounds. The dreams you keep having are showing you unresolved missions. The synchronicities you can't explain are guiding you to hidden doorways. The emotions that rise without warning are messages from other versions of you, calling for integration, attention, evolution. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. Everything is relevant. You are not small inside this reality. This reality is inside of you. It lives within your field, bends to your frequency, listens to your choices. That's why it matters so deeply how you think, how you feel, how you show up. You're not here to escape the illusion. You're here to wake up inside it, to become lucid, and then to create. Because the awakened dreamer doesn't just observe the symbols, they play with them. They don't just navigate the maze, they build new paths through it. You are that dreamer now. And you don't need perfect clarity to start, you just need to become present. Reality sharpens as you show up. The more you commit to waking up, the more the dream aligns with the version of you who already has. Start to speak with intention. Move with purpose. Make choices that reflect the soul, not just the ego. The ego will always want control, safety, repetition. But the soul wants expansion, experience, risk, embodiment. When you listen to the soul, you begin vibrating at the frequency of your higher self. And when that happens, you start aligning with the timeline that mirrors your highest potential, not because you forced it, but because you became it. This is how reality works now. You're not waiting for signs, you are the sign. You're not waiting for proof, you are the evidence. Your life becomes the ritual. Your thoughts become the blueprint. Your energy becomes the access point to new layers of experience. And no, it doesn't mean everything will be easy. But it will be conscious, which is far more powerful. You'll begin to feel pain with purpose, joy with presence, uncertainty with courage. That's the mark of a lucid soul, one who navigates the dream not by avoiding difficulty, but by understanding it. Even the loops, the repeated challenges, the familiar triggers, are gifts. They're opportunities to choose again. And with each conscious choice, you shift not just your own story, but the stories of all the versions of you scattered across the multiverse. Every time you act with compassion instead of fear, speak your truth instead of shrink, honor your intuition instead of obeying your conditioning, the grid realigns, the dream updates, the code rewrites itself. And that's the revolution. Not in some external battle between good and evil, but in the quiet reclaiming of your own frequency. Because when you stand fully in remembrance, the simulation can't hold its old shape anymore. It has to change to reflect you. So, now what? Now you live as if you remember, not just intellectually, but viscerally. You let your days become sacred. You let your relationships become teachers. You let the mirror of life show you what still needs to be healed, integrated, remembered. You stop chasing outcomes and instead align with frequencies. You trust that when you are what you seek, life has no choice but to mirror that back. And, perhaps most importantly, you awaken others. Not by preaching, but by being. When you carry the frequency of radical remembrance, you become a tuning fork for others who are ready to rise. Your presence becomes the activation, your truth becomes the doorway, your alignment becomes the ripple. You came here to wake up, you planned this, you chose this body, this timeline, these challenges, not as punishment, but as portals. You knew that forgetting was part of the journey. You knew the density would be hard, but you also knew you'd find your way back. That moment is now. You don't need anyone's permission to awaken. You don't need a guru, a ritual, or a certification. You just need the courage to remember who you really are, and then live like it. So, take this knowing, this flicker of remembrance, and breathe it into your life. Walk through your world, not as someone waiting to be rescued, but as someone who remembers the truth. The truth that you're not a victim of reality. You're its lucid architect, and the dream is just beginning.